So my surgical team with Dr. Vallarta in Guadalajara for this dual mobility hip surgery, it was like being in a soap opera, like when everyone's just beautiful and on it, and like their hair and makeup are perfect, and the Beatles was blasting in the surgery room in such a beautiful way. Like these guys were like in sync. They were a high performance surgical team. And if you don't know me, like I'm not new to surgery. This is the 5th surgery I've had. I've had ACL surgery, meniscus surgery. I had a tumor in my tibia bone. I had a tumor in my uterus. So this was like, and I've done a lot of surgeries in Mexico and one in the United States, and I've never seen anything like this. So dual mobility also, I found out, is not for hip replacement, is not often used in the U.S. because it's, I guess, and I haven't done research on this, but I guess because it's more expensive and the insurance companies don't like to cover it, and there's a little bit longer of a immediate healing time because it's a little more invasive of a surgery. So the actual in-hospital healing time, it's not outpatient because you need to port and you need to be there while it's draining. And it was just so cool to have this guy who just loves the best technology. He's done over 1,000 hip replacement surgeries. He does a few hundred a year, and he works primarily with athletes. And I mean, I'm a 52-year-old athlete. That's how I see it. I've always been very athletic, and he's telling me, he's like, "What do you want out of this?" And I'm like, "I want to be able to walk again." He's like, "You're going to be able to do everything." And as a skier and a biker and a runner and all the things like that is, I really do just want to be able to walk without pain. I would be completely satisfied with that result because by the end I could only walk I really couldn't walk anywhere without messing up my knee. So how did it go? How is it all? I'm going to, I'll publish some blog posts on this. I went to Joya Hospital. If you don't speak Spanish, I don't recommend going to do, like I would, like if you don't speak Spanish and you're going alone, I wouldn't recommend doing this. I do speak quite a bit of Spanish, not great, but I can definitely communicate. And I've traveled alone a lot in my entire life. I'm a fiercely independent person. So for me, it worked out beautifully just because I was there with hospital staff doing that like deep, kind of like drugged out phase healing where it's not, I don't know, for me to disrupt my family and what they're doing, I'd rather be with them and more like further down the stages in recovery. And again, for most people, you go to the hospital with your people and they stay there. There's a great hotel across the street that's very affordable. It's very easy to go, to bring your people. And how much did the whole thing cost? Drum roll, please. My dual mobility, which is like fancy pants hip surgery, cost $9,200. It's so crazy. The U.S. medical system is so messed up because you just can't price shop. You can. It's just very, very difficult. It takes a while because you have to add up a lot of different bills to get it. The best way to do that price shopping is to say you're uninsured if you are uninsured. I use Crowd Health. I know that's another big question. Will Crowd Health cover this? I believe so. We'll see. It seems like they'll cover it in full. So, whether they do or whether they don't, at this point, I don't care because I can walk without pain, and that's worth $10,000. It's worth $100,000. It's worth my life, right? If you can't walk, you can't do anything. So when I look back at how, why did I delay? I know that's a big question that some people have. Like, why did I delay having this hip surgery? How did I let it get so bad? And he did say it was like one of the worst. It was one of the worst hips he's seen in a while. Just from the degeneration. Obviously, I didn't have my hip shattered or anything like that. He said the articular surfaces were all like scrambled eggs from osteocytes and just like, total mess in there. So the reason I waited is when Indy went into high school and she's graduating in about 6 weeks. When she went in, or 8 weeks, when she went into high school, like the day of her preseason, I found out I had cancer, and I had the radical hysterectomy like the day before. And so like her entire high school has been, and 2 of her friends' moms died of cancer while she was in high school. And I was not, I had very rapid onset of the hip arthritis in my left hip, which is very common following a hysterectomy where you don't have hormones. And I couldn't have hormones because of the Lynch syndrome, which is why I had the cancer, or which gave me a much higher likelihood of having the cancer. It was tripped, the cancer, the epigenetic environment. You can read all about it in Witch's Cancer Journal. It was basically tripped by a lot of extreme vaccine exposure. I wasn't vaccinated, but I was exposed on an airplane ride and started bleeding the next day. And it basically tripped the switch on my epigenetics and started a 3-month growing turbo tumor, which landed me, 3 pints of blood down in the hospital. So I had a lot to recover from. And then the quick onset, that very rapid onset of the arthritis, I was dealing with like not wanting to do chemotherapy and radiation post-op from the cancer, and knowing that the margins were not clean. My lymph nodes were so messed up in my pits and in my groins, and I was just going everything like as natural as I possibly could at that point, to not have to deal with chemo and radiation, because my aunt had died of chemo, and before that she had been radiated and had really lost a lot of functionality in her bladder and in her ability to control her feces. So I just was like, no, that's no way for me to live. I'm an athlete. I'm a super wise wellness wisdom leader. I wanted, so that was her high school. my kid's high school is that, while watching me radically deteriorate from hip arthritis, where I couldn't walk well. I knew I needed about a year and a half ago, not that long, a year ago last December, so we'll call it 15 months ago, I did go for an x-ray and found that I had bone-on-bone hip arthritis in my left hip bone. At that point, I was back on hormones, and because there was a study that said with Lynch syndrome, you can indeed be on hormones. So even despite being on hormones, doing a ton of physical therapy, doing a ton of restructuring my glute muscles, my hamstrings, really building a lot of equilateral symmetrical strength, I just was not able to get on the other side of it. So my daughter watched me just, have less and less mobility, have more and more problems with all the things that I love to do, like skiing and biking and surfing, and become increasingly just like an old lady who just sits at her computer and works and, just just can't do shit, cool shit. Can't walk to the restaurant, can't walk to the store, can't walk around the block. Yeah. So I had to process a lot of the trauma from my physiology, from these surgeries, and I had to really be ready for this hip replacement. And the Amanita diet is really what got me over the edge. So the Amanita diet, and you can read more about that at clubthrive.global. I'll start publishing a lot more on that there. You can also find us in school at Club Thrive TV on school, and it's posted on school on that. It is a magic mushroom. It's not psychedelic as much as, or it's not as high in psilocybin, I should say. Is it psychedelic? It's a nervine. If you ask me, it's a vata pacifying nervine that builds ojas in Ayurveda. That's, I think, a much better way to describe it than a psychedelic. It's low in psilocybin, so you don't get all the the cool visual trippy trip experiences. But you do heal the deep trauma in your nervous system, and that's what happened with me when I was on the Amanita diet for 2 months. And afterwards, when I got my MRI results back, and I saw that stage that I'm really at, there's just between the X-ray and the MRI results, I was like, if I don't do this, I'm just going to ruin my knee. Because if you don't fix your hip, you end up taking it downstream in your knee. You can also take it cross-stream in your other hips. I'm like, I got to stop doing the damage. At that point, I went full on, full throttle, find the best surgeon that I could. I found Dr. Vallarta and his charming wife, Lizette, in Guadalajara, and they're absolutely soap opera rock star team. Mind blown experience. Yeah, I don't think I'll ever have a better surgery again in my life. It was so cool. It was fun. If a surgery can be fun, it was fun. Just absolutely phenomenal. And then I was in the hospital for 2 nights recovering, and then I flew back. I know you're not supposed to fly. I did a ton of research. I used Perplexity. I use 4 or 5 paid AI tools personally. And for me and my personal journaling and research and health history, I use Perplexity. And so Perplexity, I went back and forth with the safest way for me to get back to Punta Mita, given the drugs that I was on for anticoagulation and given the amount of time in movement and the type of movement of the vehicle, etc. And we decided on flying, me and my Plexity friend. And now I'm back here. There's surfers out front, and I'm in like deep R&R. It's only a 50-minute flight, and it's very low altitude. So I wasn't really worried about clotting. I was just trying to minimize the amount of fatigue that the entire trip took. Did I do all that alone? I did, and I don't recommend it. I feel like I'm totally a crazy person. Some of you are like, you still have PTSD. Well, I might and I might not. Like it all really worked out. And now I'm surrounded by my neighbors, and they are, oh my gosh, there's fresh green juice in the fridge. There's fresh sushi in the fridge. There's fresh salad in the fridge. There's homemade seafood bone broth soup in the fridge. I mean, and there's a beautiful orchid that Anna brought me, and just everyone's been taking such good care of me, and I'm just receiving, and Susan's been an absolute angel. And Winston comes down on Wednesday. I can walk around on my walker. I have no pain. I just have swelling. And I'm not totally diving back into work. I'll work a bit this week. I'll talk to some people. What else do people want to know? Oh, people always want to know about the constipation thing. Yeah, urine enemas. Those of you who do urine, you might wonder how age. You would want to go with the medium age urine, like a month or two is going to really help with evacuation. But then with the deep localized healing, you go with as aged as you've got. So for me, I have urine here that's a few years old, and I will start using that in enemas probably probably not for another couple of days. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but right now that's what it feels like is true. And then what am I eating? I'm mostly eating microbiome diet. Yeah. And then I'm off caffeine just so I can get as deep of rest as I possibly can. And yeah, I just appreciate there's so many people offered to pray for me and send healing energy. And I just said, yes, please. And just receiving that has just been awesome. So if you've been one of them, I just really appreciate that. And yes, I will publish more on how to do medical tourism in Mexico, as it's a recurring theme in my life. All right, that's my update.